sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the fields, as a single tractor hummed in the distance, cutting through the fading light like a knife through butter. The quaint town of Willow Brook seemed peaceful from afar, nestled between verdant hills and surrounded by golden wheat. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. The mob thought Farmer Joe was alone, but they were dead wrong. As the sun sank lower, the fields began to take on a different personality. The wheat whispered secrets in the wind, and the crops rustled nervously as if they sensed the danger approaching. Farmer Joe, a man steeped in the simplicity of farming and the warmth of community, always wore a weathered cap and a face lined with hard-earned experience. He'd spent decades tilling the soil, his hands calloused and strong from years of labor. But today, things felt different. Today carried a weight, a darkness that seeped into the very air he breathed. The mob had descended into town just a week ago, a group of hardened men with cold eyes and hungry stomachs. Their presence was like a shadow cast over the community, signaling trouble. Rumors filled the air like smoke. Tales of extortion, threats, and a few people disappearing into the night began to swirl through the dilapidated diners and porches of Willow Brook. Everyone felt it, a palpable tension tightening the very fabric of their lives. And like many, Farmer Joe had heard the whispers. He knew he wasn't alone, even if the world saw him as just a simple farmer. In the recesses of his barn, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, lay a cache of secrets buried deeper than the roots of the crops in his fields. He wasn't just a man with a tractor and a plow. He was a guardian of something powerful, a power that thrummed through him like the heartbeat of the earth itself. As the last rays of sunlight faded, casting twilight over the fields, Farmer Joe wiped the sweat from his brow and set out towards the barn. He paused to look back at the farmhouse, a sturdy structure they had built together, brick by brick, with his late wife, Margaret. Her absence was like a gaping wound he could never tend to, yet it pushed him forward, fueled his resolve. This was home. Those fields were sacred, and he would protect them at all costs. But tonight, the stillness would be broken. The mob had their eyes set on something they believed was easy prey. Joe had heard their plans whispered in hushed tones at the local bar, where the tension hung like the smoke from cheap cigarettes. But they had no idea what lay beneath the ordinary facade of his life. As he entered the barn, the darkness enveloped him like an old friend. He moved quietly, the familiar smell of hay and wood filling his nostrils. His heart raced as he approached the hidden trapdoor. With a quick glance over his shoulder, he pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment that felt more like a vault than a storage space. Inside lay an arsenal, not the kind one would expect from a man of the land, but tools of a different trade, meant for another reality. Joe wasn't just a farmer. He had once trained as a soldier, something he'd kept buried under years of plowing fields and sowing seeds. This life was meant to be left behind, but with trouble on his doorstep, the old training stirred to life like a slumbering beast. Nervously, he assembled what he needed, his heart pounding like the thrumming of the alarm bells warning him of impending danger. He peered out of the barn, catching sight of figures moving stealthily in the dusk. The mob had arrived, cloaked in darkness, their intentions as murky as the shadows they cast. They thought Joe was all alone, a harmless farmer with little defense. But they were about to learn a lesson they wouldn't forget. The first few men entered his land as if they were kings surveying their new territory. Their leader, a tall man with a slick-back haircut and an unyielding grin, looked around with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Let's make this quick, Joe," he called out, voice booming, shattering the serenity of the night. "You know why we're here." The audacity of his words struck Joe like a thunderclap. They thought they could intimidate him, scare him into submission. He decided right then and there that he would not yield. His voice echoed back calm, yet fierce. The wind carried his words like a banner of defiance. For a moment, the mob leader paused, taken aback by the resolute spirit emanating from Joe. But he quickly regained his swagger. "Look, Joe, this doesn't have to be difficult." Joe took a step forward, his breath steady. "You're mistaken if you think I'm afraid of you. This land is my pride and joy." Tension crackled like dry kindling, and in that heartbeat the atmosphere shifted. For the first time, Farmer Joe wasn't just a humble farmer, he was a fierce protector. The mob hadn't come for a fight but to seize an opportunity. They underestimated the resolve of a man whose roots ran deeper than most of theirs. The leader's grin faltered just slightly, and that flicker heralded the intensity to come. "Get him," he barked, and chaos erupted. It all unfolded like a scene from a movie, but this was real. Men charged forward, their intentions clear, but they hadn't expected the ferocity that Farmer Joe had kept hidden beneath his stoic exterior. As the first man lunged, Joe sidestepped, his hands steady, trained reflexes taking over. He dropped the man to the ground with a precision that surprised even him. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he faced the next attacker and the next. The barn was filled with the clatter of chaos, shouts mixing with the sounds of a struggle. But Joe held his ground, using years of training along with sheer will to turn the tide. Each movement was fluid, instinct kicking in, and for a moment, past and present collided into a fierce storm of action. The remaining mob members hesitated, uncertainty creeping into their eyes. They'd come expecting an easy win, a farmer with a heart full of love for his land, easily intimidated. But Farmer Joe was not just a man of the soil, he was a warrior in disguise. The barn transformed into a battleground, shadows dancing off the walls as the atmosphere crackled with clashes and shouts. Each man that fell only fueled the fire within him, igniting the memories of battles long forgotten, of loyalty and courage. But Joe wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for Margaret, their dreams, and the very essence of Willow Brook. Finally, in a decisive moment, the leader lunged at Joe, a flash of desperation in his eyes. Joe anticipated the move, pivoting swiftly, and used the man's own momentum against him. With a well-placed strike, he sent the mob leader crashing to the ground. Silence hung heavy in the air. The remaining men exchanged glances, the reality of their failure sinking in. They didn't just lose a fight, they'd lost to the very heart of a community they'd underestimated. After a quick glance at their fallen comrade, they turned to retreat, scrambling into the night like shadows fleeing the dawn. Joe stood tall, breaths heavy, chest rising and falling as the adrenaline began to dissipate. The silence settled around him like a blanket, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just erupted. He took a moment, leaning against the barn door, gathering himself. The fields loomed around him, sacred and alive, whispering encouragement, pulsing with the heartbeat of life once more. When he finally stepped out, the moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the remnants of the struggle. Farmer Joe gazed at the quiet land, the comforting familiarity washing over him once again. In his heart, he carried an unshakable pride, not just because he had defended his home, but because he had revealed strength he thought he'd buried long ago. As he stood there with a sense of empowerment washing over him, he knew this wasn't the end. The mob might return. They would surely regroup, emboldened by their own sheer ignorance. But armed with unforeseen courage, Joe was ready, determined to protect not just the land, but the legacy of love, resilience, and community that once thrived there. In the heart of darkness, Farmer Joe found light, a spark igniting, reminding him of the deep roots that went beyond the soil beneath his feet. For beneath every inch of that land, beneath every row of crops, lay not just earth, but stories of hardship, bravery, and love stories that he would defend with everything he had. And as the night deepened, with the moon shining like a proud guardian above, the man the mob thought was alone stood resolute, knowing that true strength was seldom what it seemed. His life, once painted in shades of solitude and quiet labor, now pulsed with purpose against a backdrop of renewed hope. The battle may have been won, but Joe knew that his farm was not just soil and crops. It was a living testament to the undying spirit of a man who had more to lose than anyone could possibly imagine. The moon hung high in the midnight sky, casting an eerie glow over the quiet fields of Maple Grove. It was just another ordinary night, or so it seemed. Farmer Elliot Mercer paced slowly among the rows of corn, the rows stretching endlessly towards the horizon. He was a man of the land, weathered, strong, and dedicated. To the casual observer, he was merely an aging farmer, tending to his crops alone, the faint rustle of corn the only sound breaking the night's silence. But Elliot carried a secret deeper than the roots that anchored his crops. Under that calm facade, change was brewing. The townsfolk had been talking, whispers echoing through the local cafe and the barbershop downtown. Rumors of a mob creeping into Maple Grove had surfaced, a gang of ruthless men intent on taking what didn't belong to them. At first, Elliot shrugged it off. After all, he was just a farmer. But with each passing day, he felt the tension in the air, thick like summer humidity. Still, he kept his secret tucked away like the hidden fall harvest beneath the surface. One fateful night, with clouds swirling ominously overhead, the mob arrived. 5 men, their faces obscured by shadows, loomed like storm clouds on the far side of his property. Their eyes glinted with malice, and far from the farms of Maple Grove, they were a stark reminder of everything Elliot had fought to protect. Their leader, a man named Jake, sneered as he stepped forward, his voice low and venomous. Elliot stood tall, his heart pounding. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he said, voice steady. The words felt heavy on his tongue, but they also felt liberating, a truth wrapping around him like a warm cloak. This wasn't just land, this was his family's legacy. Jake laughed, his voice echoing through the night as the others joined in, laughter laced with scorn. They thought him defenseless. To their eyes, he was merely an old man with a simple life, a man of the earth who did not know the ways of violence. But beneath the dusty exterior, Elliot housed a past full of thunder and storms. Years ago, he had been a soldier, trained in the art of tactical defense, of survival. But those memories had been buried deep. Once a source of pride turned into a shadow of guilt as he sought peace in the tranquility of farming life. Deep inside his barn, hidden beneath floorboards in a compartment painted over and ignored, were tools of a different trade, tools he had sworn never to use again. Elliot felt the pulse of his heart race as he glanced defensively at the mob. "Take a look at that corn, boys," he gestured, trying to buy some time to think. "That's not all I grow." The leader snorted, dismissing his words. He and his men moved like wolves encircling their prey, indignant, ready to strike. Fearless resolve locked into place, and the memories of combat flickered to life within him. Elliot had seen difficult decisions made in an instant, the fulfillment of duty overshadowed by loss. His life had been shaped by words like honor and loyalty, but now it all came down to one moment. He took a breath, savoring the freedom in his chest, and stepped back towards the barn, leaving the mob momentarily confused. In a swift motion, he opened the trapdoor and retrieved his hidden arsenal. They may think he was alone, but tonight he would not stand down. With a steely resolve, he emerged from the barn, tools in hand. "Let me show you what a farmer can really do," he growled, revealing a sturdy pitchfork, its prongs glinting menacingly in the moonlight. Jake's bravado faltered for a moment, but it quickly returned as he barked an order. His men charged, but Elliot was ready. He didn't hesitate. Years of training flooded back like water through an open dam. Elliot had learned to anticipate movements, to flow with the energy around him. He dodged the first attacker, a powerful swing of the pitchfork sending the man sprawling into the cornfield, and the rustling plants became his allies, muffling the sounds of the impending battle. Another combatant lunged, but Elliot dodged again, pivoting as he'd been trained to in combat. The pitchfork became an extension of his will, striking true, a decisive jab that sent yet another man to the ground, struggling. The fear rippled through the mob. They hadn't come expecting a confrontation, let alone the ferocity of their opponent. One by one, doubt crept into their minds. They were facing not just an old farmer, but a man with a deep-rooted love for his land and its history. He could see it in their movements, the way they hesitated. They were not prepared for him to be more than a man to bully. Panic cut through their bravado. This was not the easy score they envisioned. This was a fight, and fleeting self-assurance shifted to apprehensive uncertainty. Jake shouted, rallying the remaining men, but his voice wavered under the weight of despair. "Get up." Yet the resolve began to shatter, and Elliot seized the moment. "Leave now, while you still can," he warned, his voice steady as granite. But the mob wasn't ready to yield easily. As fear began to turn into desperation, Jake charged one last time, a surge of aggression overtaking him like a wild animal ensnared. He lunged at Elliot, fists swinging, and Elliot braced himself for a close encounter. Instinct guided him. A low sweep of the legs sent Jake crashing down to the ground. Just as he fell, the sound of his body hitting the earth echoed in the air, a resounding declaration. The remaining men looked on in disbelief, their leader bested by a man they thought they could overpower. The pitchfork trembled in Elliot's hands. "Turn around," he said, more a command than a request. "You've lost this fight. I'm not just a farmer." In that moment, something shifted in the air. The heavy weight of fear dissipated into the night sky. The mob exchanged nervous glances, realizing that the battle could easily turn in their favor or against them. They looked at their fallen leader, helpless at Elliot's feet, and the might of their leader slowly faded away into uncertainty. With a gust of wind, the remaining men decided enough was enough. They turned, fear etching itself upon their faces as they fled into the shadows, leaving their leader behind. The sound of their retreat echoed like a ghostly whisper, winds of panic carrying them far away from Maple Grove. Elliot stood there, panting but victorious. The true weight of what had just happened hit him slowly. This was a battle won, not just for the farm but for his place in the world. The land had given him purpose, and he had fought valiantly to protect it. He looked at the stars shining brightly overhead, a blanket of warmth spreading across the heavens. In that quiet moment, he realized he had unlocked a part of himself he thought was buried forever, a warrior's spirit, intertwined with the soul of a farmer. But the fight had revealed more than mere survival. It had reminded him of his connection to his heritage and home. The fields were more than just soil and crops. They were the stories of his ancestors, filled with love, resilience, and strength. He could feel the warmth of their spirits around him, embracing him, urging him to carry on. As dawn broke over Maple Grove, Elliot stood in his fields, the corn swaying gently in the morning breeze, whispers of triumph carrying forth. He wiped the sweat from his brow, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. There would be challenges ahead, and who knew if the mob would return. But in that moment, he understood that he was never alone. He was connected to the land, to his past, and to the spirit of those who came before him. And with that connection, he would face whatever came next, steady as the sun rising on the horizon, ready to defend his home, his legacy, and the people of Maple Grove. For Farmer Elliot Mercer was never just a farmer. He was a guardian, a protector, and an embodiment of everything worth fighting for. A faint rustle broke the heavy silence of the cornfield as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. Farmer Tom Miller brushed the sweat from his brow, standing amidst the tall stalks that towered over him, whispering their secrets in the wind. To the outside world, Tom appeared just a humble farmer, toiling away in solitude. But somewhere in the depths of his barn lay a secret, a legacy that could change everything. On the outskirts of the small town of Briarwood, people gathered in hushed tones. Rumors swept through like wildfire. The notorious Midnight Hounds were making their presence known again. A mob of hardened men had been terrorizing the outskirts, using threats and intimidation to claim whatever they wanted. They targeted the weak, the unsuspecting, and they thought Tom was an easy mark. The truth was far more complicated. Tom's farm had been in his family for generations, each inch rich with history. Yet as he planted seeds day after day, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. He sensed the darkness creeping in, a sense of vulnerability that gnawed at him. The Midnight Hounds had taken from other families, and it seemed only a matter of time before they turned their eyes toward him. The sun melted away and twilight overtook the land. A chill settled in the air, perfect for brewing mischief. Tom finished his chores, his mind racing. He recalled tales from his father, stories of bravery and valor that echoed in the background of his childhood. But those stories were worlds away from the quiet life of a farmer, weren't they? As he closed the barn door, he couldn't help but wonder if those tales were meant to prepare him for a different time, a different life. As darkness engulfed the landscape, movement caught his eye. Shadows shifted outside his property, and he tensed instinctively. They were here. The Midnight Hounds had arrived. There were 4 of them, all hulking figures clad in black, their faces half hidden beneath the hoods of their jackets. They moved like predators, prowling through the rows of corn as if searching for prey. Tom's heart raced. By daylight, they were feared. Under the cover of night, they felt invincible. But they had no idea what they were stepping into. Tom took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. He turned to the barn, making sure to keep his movements quiet. There, under a rickety old floorboard, lay his secret. It wasn't just the crops he tended. Tom had acquired that old rifle, once belonging to his grandfather, a soldier who had fought bravely in wars long past. The weapon wasn't just a tool of defense. It seemed to thrum with the stories of all the family members who'd come before him, a connection to their courage and strength. With practiced hands, he retrieved it, checking the chamber, the familiar weight of the rifle filling him with a sense of purpose. He was not just a farmer tonight, he was the guardian of his lineage. As he crept back outside, he located himself in a narrow path between the stacks of corn, heart pounding like thunder in his chest. The gang was now closer, laughter mingling with their low whispers. "Look at the old farmer's house," one chuckled. Tom clenched his jaw, fury bubbling beneath the surface. "They think I'm alone," he thought, narrowing his eyes. Tension hung heavy in the air, and as the mob approached the barn, Tom steadied himself, taking aim from behind the protective veil of corn. The cold metal pressed against his shoulder, familiarity coursing through him. Sweat dripped from his brow, but he wasn't afraid. He was ready to defend what belonged to him. Jake, the leader of the gang, barked, his sneer cutting through the night air. "We know you're in there, old man. We want your land, and if you don't come out, we'll take it." Tom's heart raced as adrenaline pumped through his veins. This was it, the moment of truth. The laughter stopped abruptly, and for a moment all fell silent. There was a palpable tension, a curious mix of disbelief and irritation. Jake sneered, searching the darkness for his challenger. Tom emerged slightly from his hiding place, just enough for them to see a glimpse of his figure. "You're not just thieves," he called out, voice steady. The gang shifted uncomfortably, their confidence wavering. "Let's show him who's the coward," another man muttered, looking to Jake for reassurance. Jake spat. With that command, they rushed toward the barn, reckless and confident, but Tom was ready. He sidestepped to the left, his instincts kicking in as he fired a warning shot into the air. The sound exploded in the night like a thunderclap. The mob halted, fear flashing across their faces. Jake shouted, backing away. "Like I said," Tom replied, his voice calm yet filled with conviction. Fury ignited in him, fueled by years of hard work and countless sacrifices. He took aim again, this time more focused. Unlike the average farmer, he wasn't going to wait for them to strike first. "You decide to leave now, or I will end this right here," he warned. Jake stood defiant, but doubt flickered in his eyes. "You don't want this fight, Miller," he growled, attempting to regain control. "Worse, you've already crossed the line," Tom replied. With another deep breath, he aimed once more, trying not to tremble despite the fear simmering in his veins. This wasn't just a battle for his livelihood. It was a fight for dignity, for respect, for the legacy of his family. His grandfather's spirit stirred inside him, urging him onward. But then, seconds felt like hours, as an inner battle waged on a confrontation between fear and resolve. The gang stood before him, their laughter replaced by uncertainty. They had come expecting an easy victory, and instead, they found a man willing to defend everything he held dear. Jake suddenly shouted, raising his hands as if trying to negotiate, but Tom clenched his jaw, unwavering. "Then leave," Tom said, steady and unwavering. From the corner of his eye, he saw one of the men begin to hesitate, another step back. The gang's unity was unraveling. They hadn't expected a fight, they hadn't prepared for resistance. Jake, sensing the shift, spat out a curse. "We don't back down." Yet the bravado felt hollow. The fear in the air was palpable, the tension electric as it crackled like live wire. "You're already regretting it," Tom replied firmly, the weight of his words settling among them. He was not just protecting his land. He was taking control of his narrative, standing up not just for himself, but for every family in Briarwood who had felt helpless against the mob's cruelty. Their eyes burned with a mix of rage and surprise. Tom had ignited something inside them down. They hadn't expected him to fight back, and there, within that flicker of uncertainty, crumbled the facade of their intimidating power. With one bold sprinkle of courage, the gang turned, retreating through the cornfield, shouts echoing into the night. They yelled, their footsteps echoing further into the distance. As the silence settled back over the land, Tom lowered his rifle, heart racing but filled with an indescribable pride. He had unleashed something powerful within him, a force forged from years of dedication and hard work. The long-lost courage of his ancestors coursed through his veins, and he realized that he was not alone after all. The Midnight Hounds may have underestimated him, thinking they could take what was his, but he had risen not just for his farm, but to defend the very soul of Briarwood. He had become the protector, the fighter, a promise to himself that not 1 inch of his land would be claimed without a fight. As dawn broke, washing the fields in golden light, Tom stood tall, heart swelling with renewed purpose. No longer was he merely a farmer. He was a guardian of his legacy, a fearless spirit carving out a path for future generations. Tom leaned against the barn, breaths calm and slow, as the morning light spilled over the fields. The air was saturated with hope, enveloping him like a warm embrace. He would greet whatever challenges lay ahead with strength and resolve, always ready to defend what mattered most. In that ultimate moment of revelation, he understood. The power to protect his home resided within him all along. He was never truly alone. He belonged to a lineage of fighters, visionaries, and defenders. And with that, Tom Mercer was ready for whatever lay ahead, standing unwavering, a guardian in his own right. The wind howled through the fields of Briar Hollow, carrying with it an ominous chill as dusk descended. Farmer Jack Tyler shivered slightly, his hands instinctively reaching for his worn-out cap. From a distance, his farm looked like a scene from a painting, charming, peaceful. Rows of corn swayed gently, lit by the fading sun, but under that serene exterior lay tension, a storm gathering on the horizon. For weeks, whispers had circulated around town about the Midnight Syndicate, a ruthless mob notorious for taking control of small farms. They thrived on fear, employing intimidation to bend others to their will. Jack had heard the rumors, scoffed at them, brushed them off as the mindless chatter of nervous townsfolk. But today, something felt different. The air around him was thick with anxiety, prickling the back of his neck. As the last rays of light disappeared, a heavy silence descended, broken only by the restless rustling of the fields. Jack finished his chores, securing the barn doors, when he noticed a dark shape lurking at the edge of his property. Heart racing, he stepped closer to investigate, his instincts yelling at him to be wary. What he saw made his stomach drop. 4 figures stood just outside the border of his land, their silhouettes sharp against the twilight sky. They were dressed in worn leather jackets, their demeanor radiating menace. The Midnight Syndicate had come. Jack's heart thudded in his chest. They thought he was alone. "Good evening, farmer," one of them called out, a sneer on his face. Jack recognized him as the leader, a man named Victor. The casual way he said it sent chills down Jack's spine. He stepped forward, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. "My property's not for sale," Jack replied, forcing a steadiness he didn't feel. Victor chuckled, the sound dark and sinister. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation." Jack's breath quickened. He felt trapped between the desire to protect what was his and the overwhelming fear clawing at him. The gang was intimidating, towering like storm clouds ready to unleash rain and destruction. But he had a secret, and suddenly the memory of that secret surged through him like a current of electricity. Deep inside the barn, he kept more than just farming tools. His grandfather's old rifle lay hidden beneath loose floorboards. The rifle was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of his family's courage, a tool that had once defended this very land. Jack had vowed never to use it, but now desperation clawed at him. "Back off," Jack warned, clenching his fists at his sides, channeling an inner strength that came from generations of defending their land. The mob leader's eyes narrowed, amusement fading. Oh, an old farmer with a rifle. As he gestured to his crew, Jack noticed the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. The gang might be a pack, but they were still men, and men could be intimidated. With each moment stretching into eternity, Jack realized he had to act, to show them he wouldn't go down without a fight. He stepped back toward the barn, his heart pounding like a war drum. Victor's mockery turned to a snarl. "You think you can just hide in there?" Pushing down the fear that threatened to overwhelm him, Jack turned and rushed back into the barn, moving with purpose. Everything felt sharp and amplified the quiet creaks of the wood, the rustle of hay. He pried open the trapdoor and revealed the hidden rifle. Dust coated it, but the weight felt right in his hands. He wasn't just holding a weapon, he was grasping the courage of his ancestors. As he stepped back outside, the cold night air hit him, reinvigorating his resolve. He moved behind a stack of hay bales for cover, taking a deep breath to steady his hands. He shouted, voice clear and steady. The gang exchanged uneasy glances, uncertainty creeping back into their confidence. This wasn't the easy takeover they'd imagined. Just then, one of Victor's men, a younger guy with wide eyes, started to step back, fear evident on his face. "Maybe we should leave," he suggested. Victor shot him a glare. But the seed of doubt was planted, and that's all Jack needed. "I could fire this gun," he announced, raising the rifle slightly, "but I won't, not yet." He stared right into Victor's eyes, unafraid, unyielding. The silence hung between them, palpable and electric. Fear danced in the air, swirling like the shadows around them. The gang had come looking for an easy score, but they found a man who was willing to fight to the last breath, and that conviction shook them. "Come on, guys. Let's just go," Frank urged, visibly trembling as he eyed the rifle. Ego wrestled with survival instincts in Victor's mind. He glared at Jack, anger boiling beneath the surface. Yet even he couldn't ignore the hesitation creeping into his men. They had shown up, expecting an easy win, but now doubt coursed through their veins, laying bare their humanity beneath the bravado. "You're bluffing," Victor spat, trying to regain control over his wavering crew. "Maybe," Jack replied, unflinching, "but I'm also a protector." With quiet defiance, he took a step forward, the rifle trained on Victor. It wasn't just about the gun, it was about standing tall in the face of fear. For generations, his family had fought for this land, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it from him without a fight. In that moment, something shifted. Uncertainty rippled through the mob like a wave crashing against the shore, and as Victor opened his mouth to speak, Jack took the chance. "You think I'm alone?" He glanced back toward his house, illuminated in the darkness, memories flooding his mind of neighbors, laughter, and camaraderie. Victor roared, desperation cracking his voice, but Jack sensed the shifting tides. The men this time hesitated, uncertain whether they wanted to take on a man fortified by conviction and community. They were made up of nothing but bravado, flimsy under the weight of true threat. "Leave now, and I'll spare you," Jack warned, voice low but fierce. The standoff felt like an eternity, breaths held and hearts pounding. Jack didn't know how much longer he could maintain the facade of bravado. But just then, the sound of footsteps echoed behind him. It was his neighbors' men and women armed with pitchforks, bats, whatever they could find. Jack had rallied the community without even having to call them. They sensed the danger, felt his fear. One shouted, determination clear in his voice. Victor's scoff turned into something more fearful as his raiding crew glanced back at the growing gathering of townsfolk. The mob was crumbling in more ways than one. Victor hissed, his bravado melting like ice in the sun. But Jack felt the tide turning, energized by the support of his community, the loyal friends who stood by him in his worthiest moment. "You should have thought twice before coming here," he called out, emboldened. With those words, collective courage surged through the air. Something sparked, and Victor saw it in the glint of their eyes. The gang's confidence faded as quickly as it had come. They hadn't prepared for unity, for courage. They hadn't counted on a community rising up. "Get out of here," Jack roared, unwavering. At last, uncertainty consumed Victor, and he spat out one last curse before barking orders for his men to retreat. One by one, they faded into the shadows, dashing through the corn, the laughter drowned in rushes of adrenaline. Jack lowered his rifle, heart racing. The weight had lifted, replaced by elation and disbelief. They had stood together, defying the storm that had tried to tear them apart. The fear and uncertainty melted away like the morning mist, revealing the dawn. As dawn broke over Briar Hollow, casting gentle rays of light over the land, Jack turned to his neighbors. "Thank you," he said, heart swelling with gratitude. Laughter and relief echoed through the air, mingling with the golden light. They had bonded together, reaffirmed their commitment to the land, and the very essence of community. Once threatened, now revitalized, Jack found renewed strength in the support of those around him. In that moment, he learned something profound. True strength doesn't come simply from standing alone. It comes from the people who lift you up in the darkest hours. And that day in the fields of Briar Hollow, not only did Jack defend his home, but he forged deeper connections that would last a lifetime. With the sun shining brightly above, he faced a new day, knowing he wasn't just a farmer. He was a protector, a fighter, and a beacon of hope for those who dared to stand together against fear. The Midnight Syndicate may have thought they could intimidate him, but he had shown them the power of strength and unity, the resolve of neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder, ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead. Together, always together. The night was creeping in when farmer Hank Jenkins paused at the edge of his wheat field, eyes scanning the horizon. The moon hung high, casting silver beams across the crops, but something else loomed in the air. A tension, palpable and thick, like the humidity before a storm. Hank felt the familiar uneasiness start to gnaw at him. Just a week ago, whispers had filled the local diner talk of a disreputable gang known as the Steel Ravens, a mob that roamed rural towns, preying on those perceived to be weak. And tonight, Hank sensed they had turned their attention to him. After years of hard work, his family farm had finally begun to flourish again, and he knew that sometimes prosperity could attract trouble. As twilight deepened, Hank felt an instinctual tightening of his gut. He wasn't alone out here, but they thought he was. He had a secret buried beneath the barn, a secret that had been passed down from father to son, a relic from a time when his ancestors had fought for their land, protecting it at all costs. He turned abruptly, heading toward the barn with a determination that propelled him forward. The heavy wooden doors creaked as he opened them, the scent of hay filling his nostrils. He'd always found peace in this place, the refuge from the world outside. But tonight, that sense of security felt fragile. He stepped carefully across the wooden floorboards and moved toward an old trapdoor hidden under a pile of feed bags. With a quick tug, it creaked open, revealing a dark hollow underneath. Hank reached down and pulled out a long rifle, his father's hunting weapon, gleaming ominously in the dim light. In calmer times, he had hoped never to use it. But desperate times called for desperate measures. He checked the rifle, feeling the comforting weight in his hands. He was ready. He'd be damned if he let anyone take what was rightfully his. As he stepped back outside, the cool breeze brushed against his skin, awakening a fierce determination within him. He took a deep breath, releasing the tension that had coiled up tightly inside. He would confront them. Before he could gather his thoughts, shadows flickered at the edge of his field. A low rumble of laughter echoed through the air. Hank narrowed his eyes, recognizing the two figures emerging from the darkness: Jake and Marty, the notorious enforcers of the Steel Ravens, known for their ruthlessness and grim demeanor. Well, look what we have here," Jake shouted, stepping forward with a cocky swagger. There was amusement in his voice, but it was underlined by something more sinister. Hank stood his ground, heart pounding but resolute. "I'm not in the mood for games, boys." Marty chuckled, glancing at Jake. "Look at him, think he can scare us off with that old rifle?" "Not a joke," Hank replied, voice steady. "You don't know me or what I'm capable of." But their laughter only deepened, dismissive and mocking. "We're just here to have a little chat, Hank. This land of yours is looking mighty fine. We could make you a nice offer." Jack's blood boiled at the threat hidden underneath the playful tone. "This isn't a marketplace, and I'm done negotiating with thugs." Jake's amusement twisted into a predatory grin as he gestured toward the fields. "Oh, we're not here to scare you. We're here to take what's rightfully ours." That word hung in the air, messy. The danger of their intention seared through Hank's mind like lightning. He knew nothing good came from men like them. A personal confrontation might lead to violence, yet he couldn't stand down. Not now. "Messy is exactly what I'm prepared for," Hank said, drawing a deep breath to calm himself. Static electricity crackled between them, tension thickening the atmosphere like a heavy fog. Hank tightened his grip around the rifle, heart thudding. Jake and Marty exchanged glances. Behind their bravado, uncertainty flickered for just a moment. Then a familiar voice pierced through the silence. "Hey." Hank turned slightly, spotting his neighbor, an old war buddy named Bill, who had heard the commotion and rushed over. Bill stood tall, shoulder to shoulder with Hank, fists clenching at his sides. "Just teaching this fool a lesson, Bill," Jake sneered, momentarily shifting his focus. "Not a chance," Bill shot back, eyes narrowed with fierce loyalty. "You're not taking anything from Hank." It was a small but pivotal moment, a reminder to Hank that he wasn't alone. Together, they presented a formidable front, and he finally felt the fear start to taper off, replaced with the charge of adrenaline. "This is your last warning, boys," Hank said, voice low and commanding. Jake laughed, but his bravado was weakening. "Old, maybe," Bill said, raising a clenched fist. The shift in energy was palpable. Hank peered into the shadows, sensing other townsfolk moving closer, drawn by the confrontation. One by one, their faces emerged, neighbors armed with anything they could scrounge together: pitchforks, shovels, and a makeshift bat from the barn. The sight emboldened Hank. "This isn't just about me," he said, looking into the eyes of his friends. "This is about all of us." The Steel Ravens had come expecting a timid farmer, but now they were circling a growing number of angry townsfolk, a unified front ready to stand their ground. Hank asked, voice steady. Jake's bravado crumbled bit by bit. You're bluffing," he stammered, the group's energy wavering. The realization dawned that this was not the easy target they had hoped for. "No bluff," Hank replied firmly. "You want to fight, then you'll have to face anyone ready to defend this land. We're modern farmers, but we're not without our history." It felt electric, the energy coursing through the group, the shared sense of purpose igniting fire in their hearts. Neighbors stood together, linked by a shared history and a fierce camaraderie that lit up the night. With a final, desperate growl, Jake looked back at his partner. As they turned to retreat into the shadows, the fleeing figures of the mob tore through the tall grass. The townsfolk burst into cheers, laughter mingling with the quiet relief, their hearts buoyed by victory, unity washing over them like a warm tide. Hank's heart soared as he lowered his weapon, gratitude swelling within him. In that moment, he realized something profound. Strength didn't always come from standing alone. It resided in the connections he had forged with his neighbors, in the bonds built over years of sharing joy and hardship. Bill said, clapping him on the back. Hank smiled, the weight lifting from his shoulders like a heavy fog dispersing under the warmth of the sun. Together, they had faced adversity head-on, and they wouldn't let anyone take that away from them. Pride bloomed within him, overwhelming and liberating. As the sun began to rise on a new day, Hank looked out over his field still standing, untouched all while heartily laughing with his friends gathered nearby. The Steel Ravens may have thought they had come to intimidate a simple farmer, but they had stirred something formidable, a community ready to defend what mattered most. With hearts ablaze, the townsfolk celebrated. In the flickering dawn light, Hank felt a renewed sense of purpose take hold of him. Tomorrow would come with its own set of challenges, but for today they had triumphed together. And no matter what darkness lay ahead, Hank knew they would face it as a united force, warriors in their own right, bound not just by land but by the unbreakable spirit that surged through their community. They were no longer just neighbors. They were a family, ready to protect each other against any storm, together standing boldly in the light of a new day. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the endless rows of emerald cornfields. Farmer Bill Tanner stood at the edge of his land, hands planted firmly on his hips, surveying the fields he had nurtured for decades. Tonight was different. It wasn't just the fading light or the almost palpable stillness. Something wicked was edging closer, and he felt it in his bones. Only a week ago, whispers filled the local cafe. The Midnight Crew, a ruthless mob that terrorized small towns, had been spotted in the area. They prowled like hungry wolves, seeking out the weak, looking for easy prey. And from the moment the mayor had warned everyone about them, Bill sensed that the shadows were slowly closing in around him. Standing there, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. Bill was no ordinary farmer. He was a man who had dug roots deep into the soil, who had fought hard for every inch of his land. Yet beneath that exterior rested a secret known only to himself, a weapon hidden away, something he hoped he would never have to use. As dusk settled in, the first glimmers of moonlight illuminated his path toward the barn, its aged wood creaking underfoot. It was a sanctuary filled with memories, but also it housed a dark secret from a time long past. He moved to the back of the barn and knelt, lifting a loose floorboard. With trembling hands, he opened the small compartment and revealed a weathered handgun, a relic passed down through generations. It wasn't just a firearm, it was a symbol of protection. His grandfather had used it during desperate times, and his father had clung to it during a war that threatened their way of life. Bill had never wanted this to be his life, fighting against threats, but tonight, it felt like fate was handing him a choice. Sounds in the distance shattered his contemplation. Deep laughter mingled with angry shouts. The midnight crew had come. In that moment, Bill felt fear grip him like a vice. He remembered the stories he'd heard from neighbors who had fallen victim to violent mobs, their lives turned upside down in an instant. Farmers found beaten, their crops set ablaze, all because they'd been too scared to defend what was theirs. Bill wasn't about to become another statistic. He pulled the handgun from its hiding place, feeling its cold metal in his palm, a reminder of his family's legacy. He took a deep breath, calming the worry clawing at his insides. He stepped outside, moving toward the noise. As he approached the edge of the field, he could see them clearly now, 3 imposing figures silhouetted against the moonlight. They stood like giants, clad in dark clothing and brazen grins, the glint of malice lighting up their eyes. Bill's heart raced as adrenaline surged through him, but he stood tall, refusing to back down. Called out the largest of the 3, a man named Rufus, known for his brutality. "Nice crops you have here." Bill's voice rang out, steady and firm. "You're not welcome here." Rufus laughed, a low, menacing sound that echoed in the stillness. "Messy. That's what we're looking for. You think you can scare us off?" Bill's mind raced. This was the moment he had prepared for, but he couldn't shake the feeling that an open confrontation would lead to violence. Still, he wouldn't show fear. "You're barking up the wrong tree." Their laughter faded slightly as they exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their bravado. Bill could see the gang's confidence wavering, but Rufus quickly stifled any doubts. "You're alone out here, old man." For a moment, doubt seeped into Bill's mind. Would this be the day he lost everything? Yet he gripped the gun tightly, drawing strength from generations of farmers who had come before him. His grandfather had once faced down men like this to protect his family's legacy. "Here's the deal," Rufus began, a sneer curling his lip. "You can hand over this land and we'll walk away, or we can make things really painful." Something shifted in the air, a weight settling upon them. Bill glanced back over his shoulder toward the barn, the memories of his family flooding him. They had worked hard, toiled through seasons of drought, storms, and heartbreak to keep this land alive. He wouldn't let it fall to men like these. Bill challenged, voice steady. Rufus scoffed, but Bill saw the hesitation in his eyes. The gang wasn't accustomed to fighting someone who wouldn't back down, someone who wouldn't cower. Perhaps they thought that, standing there alone, he would simply fold under the pressure. With his heart pounding, Bill took a decisive step forward, lifting the handgun so it was visible. "You don't want to test me." In that moment, the air grew charged, electric. The gang members faltered, their bravado wavering. Whether it was the weight of the gun or the conviction in Bill's eyes, something was shifting. Rufus looked from Bill to his companions and then back again. "Are you serious?" Rufus stammered. "Not if you walk away right now," Bill replied, his voice calm, yet heavy with authority. The challenge hung in the air, thickening the tension as they stood frozen against the backdrop of shimmering stars. The stillness that followed was longer than Bill anticipated, and his heart raced, the silence almost deafening. Then came the sound of footsteps, a rustling behind him. The shadows of more people appeared, figures emerging from the dark corners of the field, neighbors Bill had known for years, armed and ready. Their faces were set with determination. One called out, stepping forward. It was Sam, a friend and fellow farmer, standing stoically beside his wife, both visibly armed with pitchforks, ready for the fight. "Just a little chat," Bill replied, eyes never leaving Rufus. The mob's confidence crumbled further. Rufus glanced at his men, who were now visibly shaken at the sight of the growing crowd. They thought they could intimidate an old farmer, but Bill had rallied not just himself, but the very essence of his community. One of Rufus's lackeys urged, fear finally overriding their bravado. Rufus roared, trying one last time to hold his ground. Bill spotted the look of uncertainty on Rufus's face. He knew that their moment of reckoning was upon them. "You'll have to go through all of us," he declared, locking eyes with each of his neighbors. A sudden flicker of unity ignited among the crowd, bolstering their spirits. Fueled by the strength of community, they refused to let their farms be overrun by thugs. In that moment, Bill felt the room around him shift. It wasn't just a gathering of farmers. It was a fortress formed from years of friendship, labor, and shared struggle. One by one, the townsfolk raised their weapons, signs of solidarity igniting the night. Rufus's expression turned from defiance to desperation. The spotlight of the confrontation shifted. He shouted, taking a step back, pulling his men with him. "Fine," Bill called out, feeling emboldened. As the gang scurried away into the darkness, laughter erupted among the gathered townsfolk, a choir of relief and victory ringing through the night air. One woman exclaimed, a nod of triumph in her voice. Bill stepped back, breathing deeply as the adrenaline surged through him. "We fought for what's ours," he said, pride swelling in his chest. In the aftermath, the field, once filled with foreboding shadows, felt alive with the warm glow of camaraderie and resolve. They may have thought they could pick apart the fortitude of a solitary farmer, but Bill had shown them that in unity, true strength resided, the power to protect what mattered most. As dawn broke over the horizon, the town of Cedar Grove awoke to a new day, embracing the sun not just as individuals, but as a united force. Bill and his neighbors gathered close, sharing stories of their triumph and dreams for the future, the air filled with determination and hope. Reflecting on their shared struggle, Bill felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about farming. It was about community, heritage, and doing whatever it took to protect the legacy passed down through the generations. They had fortified each other in a way that stretched beyond self-defense. Standing there, surrounded by the friends who had rallied to his defense, Bill looked at the land that had been his sanctuary, the fields that connected them all. He would never forget how close he had come to losing everything, how a precarious balance of fear had tipped into triumph. With the sun warming the earth underfoot, he felt a promise blooming within him. He would always stand guard. And as long as he was left standing on his land, he wouldn't fight alone. This was home, and together they had proven they could face any storm that loomed ahead, side by side, hearts beating as one. The wind howled across the vast expanse of farmland as twilight settled in, casting a blanket of shadows over the crops. Farmer Jake Callahan stood at the edge of his land, the familiar scent of earth and wheat filling the air. He glanced toward the horizon, feeling the weight of impending danger pressing down on him. Just days ago, he'd heard the whispers of the Midnight Syndicate, a gang known for terrorizing small farms, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were coming for him. He had spent years building this life, planting seeds, nurturing the land, and creating a home for his family. But the townspeople had been talking about the dangerous crew that had started making its way through the area, taking property and leaving devastation in their wake. Tonight, the darkness felt heavier than usual, and Jake's instincts screamed that something was amiss. As he stepped back toward his farmhouse, he made a mental note to check the barn, his sanctuary. It had stood strong against storms and sun, a testament to hard work and determination, but it held a secret of its own. Jake reached the barn doors, their weathered wood creaking in protest as he pushed them open. Inside, he was surrounded by memory's old tools, pieces of machinery, and the fading scent of hay. But beneath the floorboards lay something more important, something that connected him to generations past. He knelt down, pried open the old trapdoor, and pulled out a shotgun, its surface worn but its purpose clear. This was his family's legacy, a weapon that had once defended against threats from men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. With the gun in hand, his heart raced. He wasn't just a farmer. Tonight, he could be a protector. Outside the barn, the whispers of the wind seemed to echo his resolve as he moved cautiously toward the house, scanning the fields for any sign of trouble. That uneasy feeling nestled deeper in his stomach as night fell, enveloping the farm in darkness. Moments later, he heard the unmistakable sound of gravel crunching beneath heavy boots. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. A voice shouted, laughter accompanying the words. Jake's heart sank. The Midnight Syndicate was here. Stepping out from the shadows were three men, their faces partially obscured by the darkness, but their intentions were crystal clear. They strutted across his property like they owned it, swagger dripping from their movements. The leader, a man with a scar running down his face, took a step toward Jake, a wicked grin on his lips. "Evening, Jake. Hope you're in the mood for a little chat," he said, confidence radiating from him. Jake tightened his grip on the shotgun, adrenaline surging through him. The leader laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the stillness of the night. "But why bother when we can settle things ourselves?" Jake asked, keeping his voice steady, though fear coursed through him. "Your farm, old man. You've got a nice little setup here." Jake glared at the men, anger flaring. "You can take your help and shove it." The leader's expression shifted, annoyance flickering in his eyes. "You really think you can scare us off with a rusty old gun?" In that moment, Jake felt a swell of courage. They thought he was alone, but he wasn't. He thought of his father, who had weathered storms and hardships to build a life here. He thought of his mother, who had planted seeds of love and resilience. And he thought of the hidden community around him, behind those very walls, who would stand against whatever darkness dared to threaten them. "Alone? I'm never alone on this land," he replied, his voice firm. The leader scoffed, and as he took a step forward to intimidate Jake, he moved just within reach of the shotgun aimed directly at him. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of destiny pressing down upon him. But instead of retreating, the mob erupted into laughter. They saw his resolve and twisted it into fodder for mockery. One of them jeered. Jake sensed the tension building, dread creeping in. He needed to buy some time to push them back without a confrontation. But the leader's eyes glinted with malice. A shift in the air alerted Jake, and he prepared himself, instinctively pointing the gun toward them. He shouted back, adrenaline sparking through his veins. As if in response, from behind him, he heard footsteps crunching across the gravel of his driveway, a sound familiar yet urgent. A voice yelled. It was Lisa, his neighbor and a fierce ally. The determination in her voice rang clear as she raced toward him, a group of people following behind her, armed with farming tools and makeshift weapons. She shouted, raising her pitchfork defiantly at the mob. Jake saw the surprise flash across the faces of the gang members as more townsfolk stepped out from the shadows, gathering together in solidarity. It was a scene of unity that made his heart swell. Each person embodied the spirit of community, revealing that he was far from alone. The leader declared sarcastically, but Jake could see the fear simmering just beneath the surface. The shift was electric. The mob saw an army, a united front ready to defend their land. This wasn't just Jake's fight anymore. It was a collective stand against those who thought they could roll over small-town farmers. One of the gang members shouted, determination hardening in their stance, a last-ditch effort against the tide of fear welling up in their group. But Jake was resolute, facing them down with the resolve of a soldier. He challenged, raising the shotgun higher. The gang hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. The deep-rooted instinct for survival began to overshadow their bravado, fear of the many replaced by the lure of safety. The tide was shifting, and they weren't sure how to ride it. Jake pressed, his voice steady but threatening, an anchor refusing to budge in the storm. The air crackled with electric tension, a sense of unity flowing among the defenders. But just as it seemed the gang would turn to retreat, Jake felt a sharp pain in his side, a kick from one of the goons who had flanked him. He staggered, firing a warning shot into the air but feeling the wind knocked out of him. The leader shouted as chaos erupted. The mob surged forward and Jake scrambled to his feet, adrenaline surging. Lisa yelled, her pitchfork raised high, the townsfolk fanning out around Jake in a protective circle. With a roar, the two sides collided. The sound of shouting and grunting filled the air as the struggle began, the sheer force of people crashing together like a storm. Jake fumbled to reload his weapon, heart racing as a flurry of fists and tools swung through the gripping darkness. He caught sight of Lisa fighting fiercely, channeling the spirit of the community, each blow landing with a powerful intent. The faces of the mob twisted in shock and fury, feeling the weight of resistance for the first time. Jake struggled to find his place amidst the chaos, determination surging within him. But then, through the tumult, He noticed something horrifying. One of the gang members had slipped past the fighting crowd and was heading toward the barn. If they got inside, they could destroy everything he'd worked for. Jake shouted, pushing through the mess of bodies. He sprinted toward the barn, but the mob member was quicker. Just as he reached the entrance, Jake lunged forward, grabbing the man by the collar. The thug shouted, struggling against Jake's grip. But before Jake could pull him back, another shout cut through the night. The scene erupted in chaos. A second gang member had stolen a baseball bat from one of the townsfolk, swinging it with malicious intent. The crack of wood striking flesh reverberated through the night, and Jake's world spun as he staggered back, pain exploding in his side. Everything went dark. When he came to, the world around him was a swirl of colors and sounds. The fight raged on, but a warm hand gripped his wrist, pulling him back to reality. Lisa's voice broke through the haze, concern etched across her face. He nodded weakly, struggling to push himself up. The fire of adrenaline coursed through him, drowning out the pain, but he couldn't afford to back down. The fight wasn't over, and neither was his resolve. "I can't let them take us down," he rasped, fury igniting in his heart. As Jake rose to his feet, the chaotic battle continued around him. Jake's heart raced as he grasped the shotgun tightly, scanning the scene of the fight. The remaining mob members were losing ground. Their bravado melted away under the fierce determination of the townsfolk. But then, through the frenzy, he saw it. The corner of the barn door had been left ajar, and behind it stood the last mobster, fumbling desperately with something. Panic surged through him. He couldn't let them unleash whatever dark plan they had. Jake shouted, drawing everyone's attention. He glimpsed the glint of metal in the gang member's hand, their weapon. Without thinking, he surged forward, determination propelling him. He raised the shotgun, aiming directly at the figure. "Drop it." The mobster hesitated, glancing between Jake and the door, fear flickering in his eyes as he wrestled with his next move. But before Jake could seize the moment, a cry pierced the air, a familiar voice calling out in alarm. It was Lisa. In a heartbeat, everything slowed. He turned just in time to see the swing of the baseball bat coming for him. There was no time to escape. He braced himself, rage mingling with desperation as instinct took over. And then everything went dark again. The sound of chaos faded, but the echoes of battle lingered in the air. Would this be the moment he lost everything he'd built? Would the Midnight Syndicate finally tear down the hope he had so fiercely defended? In darkness, nothing seemed certain. But in some corner of his mind, the spirit of his ancestors whispered he was never truly alone. He had fought for more than just land. He had fought for love, for resilience, and for the strength that coursed through the heart of every fighting spirit in his community. As he hovered between darkness and light, the future lay uncertain ahead, teetering on the edge, waiting to see just how far the bonds of family, friendship, and unity could stretch before breaking. Would they rise together, ever stronger? Or would the night consume everything he held dear? In that swirling limbo, fate hung by a fragile thread, and Jake was about to find out just how deep that bond could run.